Come on.
The only place for everything Vikings. 6-1-2 Vikings.
Welcome back to 612 Vikings. I'm Dustin alongside Drew. I know we were kind of on different sides for this episode, but today we are going to talk some Minnesota Vikings as usual. We kind of missed out on almost every single day of training camp except one. We meant to kind of get back on track and, kind of talk about every single day of training camp, but our lives got busy. We both got busy. So, other than that, Drew, how has your busy life been so far?
We're doing good. As you can see, had a move completed, so things are getting settled in there. So that is pretty much what Dustin meant by lives are being busy and finding time for it. So yeah, we're in a new background. We'll be in a new place, and didn't get to see much of the first game, but definitely sat down for the second game, which I kind of wish it was the other way around because we would have seen a win on my end here. But
Yeah.
it was still good to see. I kind of got to see some things that people have been kind of talking about, hyping up, and we'll kind of break that down into the further parts of the episode here, I'm sure. So
Oh yeah, so today we're going to kind of talk about who should make the 53-man roster as kind of like your outside guys looking in, on the roster bubble, kind of like your UDFA's as well. So with that said, I guess we can get right into this. We went through 2 to 3 weeks of training camp. We had plenty of days. I've been there every single day of training camp. Personal record, finally. And then 2 preseason games as well against the Texans and the Patriots. So we can kind of get a nice idea of who will be making it, who won't. I mean, we still have one more game left. Someone could pop up or drop off as well. But let's kind of go through guys that we know could potentially make it and have a really good chance to do that. So I'll kind of start off with our first guy. I did make a tweet about this a couple days ago, but just to kind of get in depth about it. So first one, let's start off with quarterback Max Brosmer. Really making some noise the past couple preseason games and all through training camp. During the Texans game, he was 5 of 8 passing, 47 yards, a touchdown, no interceptions. And then in the Patriots game, 15 for 27 passing. He had a lot more playing time in this Patriots game. I believe he had the whole second half to play. 156 passing yards and no touchdowns but one interception. The one interception at the end to, I think, Kyle Duggar. So, Drew, what's kind of your take on Max Brosmer kind of making the roster? I don't know if he makes it as a QB2 per se, but definitely making the roster at some point, maybe as a QB3, right?
yeah, I think he's got a shot. I would say for me, I would put him on the 53. I think it's kind of hard not to, especially with how Sam Howell's been playing. He hasn't shown it in training camp, and he hasn't shown it in the preseason. He had like a little bit. I guess he had a good first game last week, but this game it just a lot of mistakes where his pocket awareness wasn't there. And the one that really came to my mind was the interception where he tried to do like the Joshua Dobbs spin out, like the spin cycle, and try to evade pressure that way when all he had to do was just kind of step up in the pocket. So
Yep.
I think with that, I just with that game and how bad he was playing and how bad he's been doing in training camp, I think he's got to be a guy in the chopping block. I know some people have been throwing around Brett Rippon, but I think you do need that veteran leadership in there, and I think that's where I kind of lean more towards Howell getting the chopping block more than Rippon, just because you need some sort of experience outside of just Kevin O'Connell being a quarterback guy, like having that veteran guy to just be like, all right, this is how it is to be a pro and how to do the day-to-day structure. And, JJ's got the year of experience, but I think when he had Sam Darnold really being there to lean on really helped out a lot. So
Yep.
I think that's just something that I really look at, because with Max Brosmer himself, like he's only a rookie himself, so having that veteran backup could be really, really huge for him. And it'd suck that you traded back and to get Howell and then you end up cutting him, but sometimes just how the way things are. I mean, no one really expected that Brosmer would pop off like this and be a guy that the Vikings could keep on at 53. So I think I think Howell's got to be a guy that you got to consider being on the chopping block. And honestly, I think there's a real conversation to be had if he'll even start over Brett Rippon as QB2.
Yeah, right. Yeah, that one play by Howell, in the Patriots game where he just escaped the pocket, ran to his left, and just kind of chucked the ball up. You're a veteran quarterback. You know not to do that. You're not a rookie. It's just kind of a boneheaded mistake, blue screen of death moment. But like you said, it would be nice to have that veteran quarterback as your QB2. In case something does happen to JJ McCarthy, that you can kind of rely on. I know Jameis Winston kind of has been thrown around as a potential trade candidate or release candidate. So him on the Minnesota Vikings, I think, would be really fun. So I don't know. It'd be really cool to have Jameis Winston. There might be some other guys that once the roster cut down in I think a week now. Once that goes around, there will be some more guys available. Yeah. So, who do you have next for your guy?
I think an interesting player who could potentially make it onto this roster is, I know your guy is Joe Huber. We'll talk about him a little bit.
Let's go, Joe.
With Blake Brandel, I think the original plan might have just been having Blake Brandel be like that swing guard and even have Walter Rouse be kicked inside. But with Huber playing as well as he is, I'm wondering how it's going to work with that, because I think now I feel like he's deserved a roster spot. And you look at the roster and you look at does Brandel get cut? Because I don't think does Walter Rouse or School get the cut? Because I feel like Huber's played himself into a 53-man spot, and he's going to be cheaper than all these guys that you've already signed already. So I'm wondering, does Blake Brandel get the cut in your eyes?
I think, let's see, I kind of was doing like a little draft of, the 53-man roster. So to kind of get a little sneak peek for you guys, for tackles, just going down the whole offensive line, I have, I believe, 8 offensive linemen. I got to recount this. I didn't recount it. But Darisaw, O'Neal, Justin School as your tackles. Guards, Donovan Jackson, Will Fries, Blake Brandel. Center is Kelly and Juergens. One of these guys I think definitely does get the boot. You can't really let go of Michael Juergens. He's kind of like your successor to Ryan Kelly, for next year. I think he's too important to let go. Blake Brandel, in case something happens to Will Fries or Donovan Jackson just isn't picking up the offense, he can be a guy that can just plug and play basically. He's not terrible, but he's not great. Justin School, whether Darisaw plays or not, he is kind of injury-ridden. So to kind of get Justin School in there as your backup left tackle, or even Blake Brandel, if I had to pick, maybe Justin School gets the boot, and then Blake Brandel kind of goes to tackle and kind of your swing tackle. It's kind of nice that Blake Brandel can play pretty much every position on the offensive line outside of center that we know of. So Joe Huber, I think he's kind of outside looking in to get a offensive line spot, because Justin School, he's been pretty solid. I don't know what his PFF grade is throughout preseason, but maybe you can check that for me. But I don't think he's played terrible.
Yeah, so going in from years prior, he was a 68.1, 73.9 as a backup, but he only played 35 snaps. And if you go to previous seasons where he was with San Francisco in his first year there, sorry, I got to take a little lean over. He's at 70 in the 70s with San Francisco in his second year, and then his first year with Tampa in the trade. So I think he's like a nice little swing tackle. But if you look at his PFF grade in the preseason, let's see, I got to find him. He would be at 61.9 with the 71.4 pass blocking grade and a 56.7 run blocking grade. And okay. I think he's a guy that could potentially be one, because the Vikings have really been investing heavily into run blocking, because now with Jordan Addison being gone for the first 3 games, you're going to be leaning heavily on a guy like Aaron Jones and Jordan Mason, with a potentially, better defense, probably the best defense you're going to play in the first 3 games in Chicago. And, being able to run the ball is going to be the big difference maker, I think, especially, in that week 1 game, and kind of leaning, kind of easing JJ into that offense. So I'm wondering, like I said, he could get the cut too. He's only got $750,000 dead. You save about $1.25 million. So it is possible he could get the boot, just for that reason alone. And the savings for Huber is going to be a lot greater to be a
Yeah.
backup guard, and maybe week 3, maybe we see Hewer get some reps at guard, and I think at tackle, maybe that'll be the thing where we can kind of see where they're kind of leaning at with the roster.
Yeah, I think Huber, he's got one last thing on him is he's got a really good anchor on him. Good pass set too. So if he can clean up some penalties, some handwork, some footwork things too, I mean, he's still raw. He's still a rookie, but I think he has a good chance to possibly make the roster, with some backup guys kind of struggling as well. So kind of moving on, sticking with the theme of offense too. Running back Xavier Scott, I think he has a really good chance to make the roster because, in preseason, 2.8 yards for every rushing attempt, 10 attempts for 28 yards. Not too bad. I think that was against the Patriots or maybe just all preseason. I can't remember. But that's a guy that is kind of pushing Ty Chandler out the door a little bit because Ty Chandler, he could probably be, in the mix for kick return, but just really haven't seen that much in training camp or preseason. And just Ty Chandler in the preseason really hasn't been anything special. And Xavier Scott, not a great showing against the Patriots, but definitely during the Texans game, showed some promise. Had a couple nice runs in that game as well. So just kind of your thoughts on Xavier Scott. Maybe the Vikings kind of run with Aaron Jones, Jordan Mason, and then Xavier Scott as their running backs.
Yeah, I think it's kind of weird with these two because it's kind of like a tale of two backs where like Xavier Scott's really running the ball effectively, but pass blocking is still kind of thing he's trying to pick up and learn, where Ty Chandler's knock for many, many years that we've had him is he can run like a bat out of hell and run that 4.28, 4.29 40, and then when it came to the pass blocking, that seemed to be something he struggled with. Well, now in the preseason it seems to be that he's picking up the pass blocking and he's getting it where the running isn't really there anymore. So
Yep.
I think with that, if you're the GM, I think you got to really assess yourself on what's going on here because would he be in year 4 of his contract? He's in the last year, so you're going to have to pay him, somewhat. I mean, I know it's nickels and dimes, but, you look at a guy like Xavier Scott or even a Trey Stewart who's getting paid pennies on your salary cap, and let's face it, next year you're going to be in a really big hole next year, one of the most in the league. So I think when you look at that and you're looking at players you might want to keep around, maybe that's something that you really kind of assess on. Well, do we want to pay a running back that is getting paid $800,000 this year versus $2.5 million for whatever he's getting paid this upcoming season? So I think that's something that I think Xavier Scott's got a really good chance of getting on this roster and picking up a spot there as the RB3.
Oh yeah, just the kind of running backs behind Xavier Scott, just aren't anything really special. We just really haven't seen anything from him, outside, just going from Xavier Scott to Ty Chandler, Jordan Mason, and then Aaron Jones. Those are the guys that we really see. Trey Stewart just really hasn't been anything special. So moving on, if you want to go to your next guy, if you have another one.
Yeah, so I think the next guy we can look at more of on our defensive side of the ball here, and I know this is going to be the big popular name, has been Elijah Williams. He was a guy that the Vikings brought in on a tryout. They didn't even sign him after draft night, so he wasn't a priority UDFA. They came in on a tryout and is looking like he's making some noise there. So Elijah Williams, I'm wondering if there's going to be a spot for him on this D-line because, like I said, we've added a bunch of beef and potatoes on this D line with guys like Jonathan Allen and Javon Hargrave and Jalen Redmond.
They're ready to eat.
He had last year, and they drafted Ingram Dawkins, who's made some noise there, and a lot of people like LDR, and that's another guy who plays like a bat out of hell. So I'm just wondering, is there even a spot for him? On how well he's playing, and you look at some of these other guys, like who do we really look at that could get the boot to make room for Williams on the 53, or is he just a guy that you try to make as a high priority practice squad guy?
Yeah, kind of. I don't know if you can still do this, but you can still protect guys on the practice squad. I believe it's up to 3 times, right, in a week.
Yeah.
So, or not in a week, but in entirety. So that I don't know if that's a guy really worth kind of using your practice squad protection on, but maybe you find some other guys in the practice squad too, but kind of finding the guy to boot in order to keep Elijah Williams on, maybe he's playing that Taki Taimani role. Because
Mhm.
Taki Taimani was kind of like that interesting player last year that we thought would be really good, and then I believe he got hurt, and then Jalen Redmond came in, and then Jalen Redmond just was a monster
Mhm.
all of last year when he did play. So very good run stopping defensive lineman. And then Elijah Williams also very good in that preseason game. Maybe they do try to keep him on that practice squad, kind of develop him a little more, and then if any injuries come along, he can get called up to the roster. So big Elijah Williams guy, no pun intended. He is a bigger guy. So other than that, I mean, yeah, who else would you boot off to keep him on? I mean, but besides going to the bottom of the barrel of that defensive line room, it's gonna be tough. I don't know if we see any surprise cuts
Mhm.
necessarily, but yeah, it'll definitely be interesting when roster cuts come along. So
Yeah, because a thing that I know a lot of NFL teams try to do is they'll, if they really want to keep a guy like LDR, let's just say like, well, we don't really think LDR is going to get a significant amount of snaps. So let's say they're saying, oh well, we think you'll play 15 snaps. We can live without LDR playing 15 snaps. They may say, oh, you have a splinter on your finger, and then say, oh, he's out for the season, season-ending IR for a splinter. Then they'll sandbag that injury so that way they can maintain his contract and his roster status, but then give a spot to somebody else they might like lower on the roster for a practice squad role or a potentially 53-man roster role. So, and that's another thing they could potentially do too. And I think that's something that they've done plenty of times before. I mean, uh, I'm just trying to think of somebody off the top of my mind that, I know Blake Prohl, who was, a couple of years ago, I know he had a lot of season ending injuries like the ACLs, and that was something that would stack up. But,
yep,
just guys like that who would just stick around for 3, 4 years because they had those injuries or they had an injury, and they would just stick around the roster for many, many years. So I think that's another thing that they can do too. And, maybe that's a type, Taimani, or it's an LDR for room for Elijah Williams. But, it'd be kind of hard to release him, and you're running the risk of him being back on the practice squad again because he has been making so much noise for the Vikings on that D line. So, but
right.
yeah.
Yeah, so sticking with the defense, I think a name that everybody's been kind of watching too is cornerback Zemiah Vaughn. Uh, really good in training camp. With a cornerback room that we were kind of questioning coming into training camp. Like we got Byron Murphy. We kind of have an idea of Isaiah Rodgers of what he's gonna be, but everybody after that was kind of all a question mark. Even Makai Blackman, Jeff Okuda, those guys that are kind of I don't want to say known what the like. I don't know. Jeff Okuda is more known for what he has to bring, but Makai Blackman coming off the injury, we don't know what he brings. Had a good 2023 season, but again, those guys you kind of have question marks on. But Jeff Okuda had a decent camp, very strong, but as camp kind of went on, kind of fell off a little bit, but not too much. But Zemiah Vaughn, I think a guy that can definitely make the 53-man roster in a way that maybe you want to carry a couple extra corners because of some injuries or whatnot around. Because I know Brian Flores loves to use his corners. Zemiah Vaughn in the preseason games, 2 tackles, 1 pass deflection in the Patriots game. Probably had one of his better outings in the preseason. So, when you have Byron Murphy, a guy that plays outside and inside, Isaiah Rodgers, I believe he's mostly an outside guy. Brian Flores just loves him. And then kind of after that, all rotational guys that can play a little bit. You won't see too much of Zemiah Vaughn in your base or nickel defenses to start the year at least. But, good special teams guy as well. I think Zemiah Vaughn will definitely be an interesting piece this year.
Yeah, that's definitely a guy like a lot of, he's had a really strong camp. He's had some moments in the preseason. There's been some ups and downs, which is going to come with a rookie corner.
Yep.
I think for you're looking at Vaughn, I think the easiest path for him would have to be the special teams route, and you'd have to play special teams. I think
Yep.
that could be a little bit of a challenge because Tavier Thomas from the Bucks, who the Vikings signed for, a good chunk of change too, to be that elite special teams ace. He's known for being that special teams ace. He's one of the best in the league at doing that. and he's a guy that can play nickel. And maybe if he had a little more versatility, you could maybe look for it. But Mekhi Blackman, does he get the boot for him? Like, I'm wondering where you kind of knock the guy out for it. I mean, does he back up Isaiah Rodgers, or but then you're also letting go of McLaurin. So like I say, it's one of those weird scenarios where you kind of look at, maybe not as strong as that D tackle interior defensive line room, with the top heavy guys like the Allens and the Hargraves and the Phillips and all those guys. But
Yep.
you look at it where it's not one, you don't have the big ace on your corner room, but you have some jacks that can hold the fort down for a little bit, like a Byron Murphy or Isaiah Rodgers. But if you get a guy that gets hurt, maybe. But I think for Vaughn, I think he's a guy that would be kind of similar to Bo Richter last year, where he made some moments here and there. But I could see him making the practice squad. I don't know if there'd be too much issues with getting him on there. Just because most teams aren't going to want to. I don't know if he'd be really a starter on a 53-man roster team, but I think that's a guy who you could, potentially just start on the practice squad throughout this, at the beginning of the season, and then maybe, as things progress and the season progresses, maybe things change. Maybe an injury happens and you elevate him, something like along those lines. So I think for me, I think he does get on the roster, but it would have to be on a practice squad role.
Yeah, it'll be tough for him because I believe last year the Vikings to start week one, I think rolled with four or five corners, some on the lighter side for sure, but maybe this is the year that they go a little heavier in the cornerback room because they like it. I mean, you got to sacrifice a position somewhere, whether it's the defensive line, the offensive line, or the cornerback room. I think those are your three probably deepest positions on this team. So there's something that has to give at one of these positions, and one of them, another team's just gonna get lucky and get a great player from our team. So not that they're starters by any means, but definitely a good developmental guy, good player. So with that said, do you have any other guys before I get to my last one?
I'm looking at more of a different route, but you can say yours, and then I'll go with another guy. Make sure we don't say the same guy.
Yeah. So my last one, I guess I'll go with is back on offense. We're gonna go in the wide receiver room, and kind of like our dark horse candidate, I think, is Miles Price. I believe he should make the 53-man roster. Because the first 3 weeks of the season, you're missing Jordan Addison. You're kind of thin at wide receiver. And then, who knows with Jalen Naylor as well, what his injury status is going to be for week one and beyond with that hand injury. So, not a very great outing for Miles Price at wide receiver in these first two preseason games. I don't know if this third one is going to, make or break the roster for him. But the reason why I think Miles Price is mostly going to make this roster is because of his return ability. You're needed in that wide receiver room, but that return man is still up in the air. Rondell Moore was supposed to be your return guy for punt, kickoff, whatever it is. But Miles Price, I think, has really wowed a lot of Vikings fans throughout these couple preseason games with his return ability. I mean, he had a really big return in that Patriots game. Couldn't quite take it the distance, but I believe it was like an 80-some yard return. So, with that, I mean, that's one way you can make a roster is special teams. So, if you're going to take up two positions, quote unquote positions, wide receiver and punt returner, kick returner, whatever returner you have, I think that's one way of making the roster.
Yeah, that's another one too. And like I said, with things kind of looking a little lighter on the receiving side of the room, we were kind of talking about it before the show. Where do we really look at with some of these wide receivers? Because there's some questions on whether Naylor is going to be healthy for week one with the hand, and it really does look like Ty Felton could legitimately be your wide receiver 3 week one. And I like Ty Felton. I mean, he's been a special teams god in the preseason so far, and he's making a lot of key tackles. He's making some nice plays there, every now and then. I think he had one bad play where he dropped the ball or something like that on the kickoff. But when it came to the punt returns, the punting, punt team he's been pretty good on. Maybe does he get that wide receiver 3 spot and really start to expand that offense where maybe things opens up for Justin Jefferson. Maybe they're on some bubble screens, get some yards after catch that way. But Silas Bolden could be another one if they really want to go with the two kickoff return. The two guys for the kickoff return there. So it's wide open now at wide receiver. And, there's been a lot of talk whether if the Vikings are going to add a guy or not. But Miles Price I think he's got a really, really good chance of making the 53 now, especially with how he's been doing it on special teams, like you said. So,
Or we can make it easy and re-sign Cordero Patterson. He's that wide
that's
receiver
another
and
one.
kick returner. So I think he's still available, isn't he?
Yeah, yeah, I think he's still
So
available out there. He's a little on the older side, but maybe he does one
make it
last one with
easy.
the Vikings.
So
That's another guy.
oh yeah,
But kind of bringing it on to special teams with our special teams guy over there. Another
I know who you're
position
gonna
that I'm
say.
looking at is punter. Not
Okay.
a lot of people are talking about it. Like on your ESPNs or outside of your local Vikings channels. But Ryan Wright and Oscar Chapman, I think that's one that's a really really close matchup where you look at Ryan Wright, you just sign him to a deal. Do you keep Ryan Wright for the 1 year and then maybe keep Oscar Chapman on the practice squad? Because, like I said, he doesn't count towards your practice squad, your 90-man roster, so you get that extra bonus. But if you put him on the
Yep.
53, he does count towards it, even though he's an international pathway player. So I'm wondering, do they keep him on the practice squad for a bit and then maybe use that protection for him, like, kind of what we did with Chase McLaughlin back in the day? Maybe keep Ryan Wright for a year, maybe redshirt Chapman, then maybe by year 2 Chapman takes over. I don't know, but I think that's another one that could get really interesting too, because Ryan Wright is making a nice, he had a nice payday where not a lot of guarantees on it, where if you really want to cut costs and make things really cheap, you could just give Oscar Chapman the job right away. So I think things have been kind of neck and neck with those two. I think when I was looking at their punting stats, I think they were pretty much near identical. So I think that's going to be a really that could be one it can go right down to the wire, and that's actually how Ryan Wright won the job. We all kind of thought Jordan Berry had it, and Ryan Wright got the job from him. So,
Yeah.
I think things can get really interesting there. But I think he's going to have to play like his rookie year punter self, where he was kicking the ball and it was 75-yard punts. Like I don't know what's gone on if he's dealing with an injury maybe the last couple of years, but. I think that could be one that could be really, really, really close, especially going into week 1.
Yeah, it's bad when your real only highlights are throwing the ball on fourth down.
Yeah,
To get conversions too. So I don't know. It's a good position battle to have too
yeah,
for Ryan Wright at least to kind of get a little better. Have some fire in yourself to get a little better at punting. It's not just kicking the ball wherever you feel like. It's being strategic in punting that ball.
yeah.
So Chapman, I believe in the Patriots game when I believe he was holding a couple times for Will Reichard, and I believe Reichard was perfect all day. So,
Hmm.
on 4 of 5 of those kicks that Reichard had, Chapman was holding. So, and they were pretty much down the middle too. So,
Yeah,
with that said, I think what you were saying earlier with Chapman being on the practice squad for a little bit, I think that's kind of the ideal way that they'll go. Give Ryan Wright one last kind of hoorah at the season. If he plays well, you can keep Chapman on the practice squad all year. If Ryan Wright is struggling, get Chapman out there and start punting some balls. So those international guys, especially in Australia, those are really good punters. I mean, you look at Gillian, I believe he's for
hmm
played for the Chiefs, and now he's on the Texans?
yeah. I know he was with the Browns for a bit, and I think he was on the
Stonehouse, I think,
Giants.
is another one, right?
Yeah, what's that?
Stonehouse, is he another one from Australia?
I'm not sure if he is, but I know for sure. I know Mitch Wishnowsky is from the
Yep,
Niners. I know
Wisnowski.
he's a
Oh, a
punter,
bite?
but what's his name? Torrey Taylor, I think, is from Australia as well, the Bears punter. Uh, so I mean, you're seeing a big influx of these rugby players who are punting, and rugby transition more to the NFL just because there's a lot more money in the NFL nowadays. There's a lot more eyes
Yeah.
on the NFL, especially with how fast it's growing now. So I think that's why you're starting to see a little bit more of a shift there, and a little bit not a ridiculous shift, but rugby will still be the number one over there for punting there. But it's one of those things where if they really aren't getting there at the punting, maybe they switch over to football and try to get a payday that way and get to the pros that way. So it's nice to have those little options for them. But you're definitely seeing a big influx of these Australian guys coming in and punting for in college. You're seeing it, and now you're seeing it in the pros because they're starting to go to the NFL. So It's definitely interesting to see how things are changing.
Yeah, and then that should, I think, pretty much round out our list of guys that definitely have a strong case to make the 53-man roster. I don't know if we're necessarily pounding the table for these guys, but guys that have a pretty good chance to do that. Drew, do you have any other guys before we take off that you have in mind that could possibly be on there?
No, I think we pretty much got all of our guys. I think, maybe linebacker 4 is another one with Kobe King, Eric Wilson, like maybe backup linebackers for Pace and Cashman could be an interesting one, but it's not like one of them is in blowing us away.
No.
Like a McLaughlin was last year, or Bo Richter was last year, or Taki Taimani last year. So, I mean, we still got one more game left. Maybe they have an amazing week 3, and maybe they get on the roster that way. But things can definitely get interesting there as well.
Oh yeah. So with that said, let us know, guys, in the comments below. Who do you think that we didn't mention should make the 53-man roster? Is there anybody that is a favorite of you guys that you would really like to make the roster? I don't know. Let me know. Let us know in the comments what you guys think. If you guys agree, disagree with this list, and then we will go from there. So we should be live, or not live, but maybe live. Record another episode at least after the last Tennessee game to kind of get our 53-man roster final predictions in the way before roster cutdown days come around. So with that said, we will see you guys in the next episode, and enjoy the last preseason game, and Skol Vikes.